At 11:45 on September 27, 1854, 60 miles southeast of Cape Race, Newfoundland, Captain James Luce stood on the bridge of the SS Arctic, straining to see through fog so thick it swallowed the bow of his ship. The Arctic was the pride of the Collins Line. 284 feet of American engineering excellence, sidewheel paddle steamer, 2,156 tons. 4 years old and already legendary for speed and luxury. Liverpool-to-New York in 9 days, 17 hours. Gilded saloons, crystal chandeliers, marble-topped tables in the dining room where passengers paid $130 for first-class passage, 6 months' wages for a skilled laborer, 406 souls aboard, 233 passengers, 173 crew. In the fog, the Arctic was running at 9 knots. Standard practice. Captain Luce had made this crossing 19 times. He knew these waters. The bow lookout saw it first, a dark shape emerging from the white wall, 50 yards ahead. No time to turn, no time to reverse the massive paddle wheels. The French iron-hulled fishing vessel Vesta, 250 tons, struck the Arctic on the starboard bow. The sound was deafening, wood splintering, metal tearing, passengers thrown from their seats below decks. Captain Luce ran forward. The damage assessment took 90 seconds. The Vesta's iron bow had punctured the Arctic's wooden hull just forward of the starboard paddle wheel. A gash 5 feet wide, extending below the waterline, seawater pouring into the compartments. The Arctic had no watertight bulkheads. One continuous hold from bow to stern. Luce gave immediate orders. All hands to the pumps, passengers to remain calm. The ship was damaged but afloat. The Vesta appeared to be sinking rapidly, her bow crushed from the collision. Luce sent boats to assist. 3 lifeboats pulled away carrying Arctic crewmen toward the stricken French vessel. This decision would haunt the survivors forever. The Vesta wasn't sinking. Her iron hull, though crumpled, held. She would limp back to port with all 147 aboard saved. The Arctic was dying. Luce ordered sails raised to drive the ship toward shore, 60 miles away. The paddle wheels thrashed at full power, but with every revolution, more water flooded in. The pumps couldn't keep pace. 2 steam-powered pumps, manual bucket brigades, useless against the sea, rushing through a 5-foot breach. 12:15 p.m., the fire rooms began flooding. Engineers worked waist-deep in rising water, keeping the boilers running. Steam pressure dropping, the paddle wheels losing power. 12:45 p.m., the bow sat visibly lower. The Arctic was listing to starboard. Passengers began appearing on deck, women in their traveling dresses, children clutching their mothers' hands, men demanding answers. Luce maintained his composure. He ordered lifeboats prepared. The Arctic carried 6 boats total, capacity for perhaps 180 people. The ship held 406, 13E. Chief Engineer John Rogers reported fires in the boiler room were drowning. Steam pressure critical. Without power to the paddle wheels, the Arctic would lose headway and sink dead in the water. Luce faced his options, all of them terrible: stay the course toward land, and hope the ship stayed afloat for 6 more hours, stop the engines to conserve structural integrity, and drift helpless. Abandon ship. With boats for less than half aboard, he chose to run for shore. The Arctic's passengers came from wealth. Francis Skiddy Brown, financier. His wife and daughter. George F. Allen, banker, with his wife and 2 children. Mrs. E. K. Collins, wife of the steamship line's owner, traveling with her daughter Maria and son Henry. Dozens of families returning home from European tours. The crew came from different circumstances. Irish immigrants working the engine room, young American sailors on their first Atlantic crossing, experienced hands who'd survived storms and groundings. When panic came, class distinctions meant nothing. 13:30, the bow was underwater, the ship's angle steepened. Passengers rushed the boats, crew fought them back. Luce bellowed orders, maintain discipline, women and children first. The sailors ignored him. The 3 lifeboats sent to rescue the Vesta, still gone, missing. Those boats held 40 crew members, the Arctic's best chance for an orderly evacuation. The remaining boats became battlegrounds. Crew members swung oars and belaying pins to clear passengers away. They launched boats half empty, rowing desperately from the dying ship. The first boat cleared with 11 men aboard. All crew, 0 passengers, a second boat lowered with 19 men. All crew, women screamed from the railings, their children in their arms. Luce drew his pistol. He aimed at his own sailors. Some froze. Others jumped. Chief Officer Robert Gourley tried to organize a proper evacuation. He gathered passengers near the remaining boats. He called for volunteers to man the oars. 6 men stepped forward. Real volunteers. They loaded women and children. 35 souls in a boat designed for 30. It launched successfully, pulling away just as the Arctic's list worsened. 14 E's. The paddle wheel housings were submerged. The engines stopped. No more steam, no more power. The Arctic wallowed, dead in the water, bow completely underwater, stern rising. The ship held perhaps 350 people. 3 boats remained. Chaos reigned. Captain Luce made his final command decisions. He ordered the masts cut away to slow the sinking. Axes bit into wood. The foremast toppled into the sea, taking rigging and 3 men with it. The mainmast followed. It crashed onto the deck, crushing passengers gathered near the boats. A makeshift raft was assembled from deck planking and spare timbers. 50 people climbed onto it. The materials weren't sufficient. The raft barely floated under its own weight. When 50 bodies boarded, it submerged. They clung to floating debris, bodies pressed together, faces barely above water. 14:15. The last lifeboat prepared to launch. The crew loading it fought off desperate passengers. Captain Luce forced his way through. He ordered 12-year-old Stuart Holland, son of a New York merchant, into the boat. He pulled Mrs. Bronson and her daughter from the mob and physically lifted them over the gunwale. 18 people total. The boat dropped into the water, oars bit deep. They pulled away. 300 people remained on the Arctic. Captain Luce stood on the quarterdeck. His ship was sinking stern high at a 30-degree angle. Passengers slid down the wet deck planking, clawing for handholds. The water temperature was 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Survival time in water that cold, 15 to 30 minutes before hypothermia incapacitation. Francis Skiddy Brown found a floating door. He put his wife on it. He held his daughter. They waited together as the stern rose higher. George Allen held his wife and 2 children in his arms. They stood near the taffrail. The water was 20 feet below, then 10 feet, then lapping at their feet. 14:45. The Arctic's stern pointed toward the sky. The rudder cleared the water. 200 people clung to railings, ropes, anything fixed. They screamed. They prayed. Some jumped early, choosing the freezing water over the final plunge. Captain Luce removed his coat. He checked his pocket watch. 2:47 p.m., 4 hours since the collision. The ship slipped backward into the Atlantic. The stern went last, tilting vertical, then sliding beneath the surface. The suction pulled bodies down. The released air created a surge that scattered floating debris across 200 yards of ocean. The surface churned with hundreds of heads, arms waving, voices crying out. Within 5 minutes, the voices diminished. Within 15 minutes, the ocean was quiet except for the moaning of those still conscious on debris and wreckage. The cold killed them. Hypothermia shut down their core temperature. Their muscles stopped responding. Their grip weakened. They slipped into the water and drowned while still alive, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to hold on. Captain Luce found a floating piece of the paddle wheel housing. He climbed onto it. Chief Engineer Rogers appeared beside him, swimming weakly. Luce pulled him up. They drifted together, watching their passengers die in the water around them. George Allen held his family until his arms couldn't hold anymore. His wife and children slipped away one by one. He lasted another 20 minutes, before hypothermia took him too. Francis Brown's wife died on her door. His daughter died in his arms. He survived by covering himself with floating debris and maintaining core warmth somehow, a medical anomaly that doctors couldn't explain afterward. 18 hours passed. The bark Huron spotted wreckage at dawn on September 28th. They pulled survivors from the water. Most were dead, frozen in place on their rafts and debris. Captain Luce was alive, Rogers was alive, 15 others scattered across miles of debris field. The rescue ships found a total of 86 survivors, 22 passengers, 61 crew, 3 stowaways, who'd hidden in the cargo hold and escaped during the chaos. 320 died, including every woman aboard, every child aboard, Mrs. Collins and both her children, Mrs. Allen and both her children. The 12-year-old boy Captain Luce had saved, his boat was never found. Gone. The crew's behavior sparked outrage across America. The newspapers published survivor testimony, passengers who watched sailors beat women away from the boats, crew who launched boats half empty while children drowned. The story spread through New York, Boston, Philadelphia. The Collins line tried to control the narrative. They praised Captain Luce's bravery. They focused on the fog, the impossible conditions, the French vessel's role in the collision. The public wasn't buying it. The Vesta's captain testified in French courts. His crew had called out warnings in the fog. The Arctic never responded. The Vesta had tried to turn. The Arctic maintained course and speed. Maritime law was vague about liability. Both ships were operating in fog. Neither had stopped. The collision was ruled mutual fault. No criminal charges, no financial penalties beyond insurance settlements. But the court of public opinion delivered its verdict. The Arctic disaster became synonymous with cowardice, with the breakdown of the Women and Children First Code, with crew abandoning their duty. Only one survivor's testimony defended the crew. First Officer Gawley, who'd successfully loaded women and children into boats, noted that many crew members died trying to save passengers. The engineer who stayed at his post until the boilers drowned. The sailors who went down with the ship, working the pumps until the end. The truth was more complex than the newspapers wanted. Some crew were heroes, some were cowards. Most were terrified men facing death who made split-second choices in hell. The disaster changed maritime law. Within 5 years, new regulations required ships to carry lifeboats for every person aboard. Watertight bulkheads became mandatory in passenger vessels over 1,000 tons. Fog protocols were standardized. Ships in poor visibility must reduce speed, post multiple lookouts, and sound steam whistles continuously. The Collins line never recovered. The Arctic's loss destroyed public confidence. Within 2 years, the company was bankrupt. The era of American transatlantic dominance ended. British lines took over the route. Captain James Luce continued sailing until 1860. He never commanded another passenger ship. He retired to Massachusetts, where he died in 1862, age 63. His obituary mentioned the Arctic. It always would. The wreck site has never been found. 300 feet deep in the North Atlantic. The wooden hull likely disintegrated within decades. The paddle wheels, the marble tables, the crystal chandeliers, all gone into the mud and sand off Newfoundland. 86 people survived because they were lucky, because they found the right piece of debris, because their body chemistry let them survive longer in freezing water, because a rescue ship happened to be close enough to reach them before they died of exposure. 320 people died because the Arctic had a wooden hull, because she carried insufficient lifeboats, because her crew panicked, because the water was 38 degrees, because rescue came 18 hours too late. The SS Arctic disaster proved what maritime professionals already knew, but civilians hadn't accepted. The ocean doesn't care about luxury. It doesn't care about class or wealth or beautiful interiors. When a ship sinks, everyone faces the same water, the same cold, the same fear, and sometimes civilization drowns with them.